Welcome to the 11th chapter of the book of First Kings. Solomon's heart is turned to other gods. And King Solomon vasilev Solomon in Philogeneos, ke eleveginekas alotrias, ke tin thigatera pharo, ke moavitidas, ke amanitidas, ke Idumeas, ke Sidonias, ke Heteas. He was fond of women. You can add that to your English derivatives book. 5376-2. Philo, we have phileo is to love. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Philo. And then the gineos, misogyny, the gene. So those two together makes it, he's fond, loves women, which is not unusual for most men. Nothing wrong with that. But he took alien wives. Now, Ginecus, that is what changes everything. These are not to be, this was not to be done. God told them to only take wives from the race of the Israelites, Jews. And the daughter of Pharaoh, Thigatera, we have a daughter, Thigathater. It's a sort of a transliteration if you change the of Pharaoh. So he took her, mentions that a while back where he built a special palace for her. But then he took also Moabitish, Ammonitish women, wives, Edomites. The Moabites were on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. The Ammonites were up in the north. The Edomites were down in the south. Sidonians, they were in Lebanon, and the Hittites scattered all over this area. And they were from out of the nations which the Lord forbade to the sons of Israel, saying, You shall not enter to them, and they shall not enter to you, that they should not turn aside your hearts after their idols. For of them Solomon cleaved to love. Now, earlier Solomon was given all sorts of wisdom and understanding, and he wrote all sorts of proverbs and probably the book of Ecclesiastes. All of these things he wrote. So people would think, well, his name is in the Bible. It's on, the Song of Solomon. So then everything that he does is great and wonderful. But really it's not. There were to him wives ruling, 700 and 300 concubines. And his wives leaned his heart. One wife could lean a person's heart. You have 700 wives and trying to make them happy. If you're just having relations with them, it'd take you 3 years to go through all these women. And it's terrible. I would imagine there was some type of a harem where these women are put into and just saved for this one person, this one time, sort of like the ruler of Persia with Esther. It's terrible using women in that way, and it was wrong because God made it clear that there was to be one man and one woman, and the two become one. It says that in the beginning. The two became one, not 1,000 and then one man become one. No, it wasn't the way it was. But as I mentioned, that Solomon wrote all these wonderful things. It's in the Bible, God's Word. So how could he possibly have gone wrong, or what's going on where he writes all these things, but yet he's going after these other things? It says, and it came to pass in a time of old age of Solomon that his wives turned aside his heart after other gods. And his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father, Patros. And Solomon went after the Ashtoreth, god of the Sidonians, and these gods you can read them in the Wikipedia explains who they are. And Milcom, the abomination of Ammon, which is in Jordan today. And Solomon did evil to go after the Lord, that did evil before the Lord and did not go after the Lord as David his father. Then Solomon built a high place to Chemosh, the idol of Moab, in the mountain before Jerusalem, the holy city, and to Moloch, where they burned their children later, the idol of the sons of Ammon. And thus he did for all his alien wives who were burning incense and sacrificing to their idols. So, again, he wrote all these wonderful things. He wrote the Psalms, the book of Ecclesiastes, but you have to be careful when you're put into a position of teaching people the things of God, as Solomon was, obviously, with his Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes. You have to be careful when you're put into a position that you continue and do the things that God would have. I have a exercise routine that I do that is using a speed bag. And I bought the speed bag here to show it to you. And you hit it, bang, 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 and it goes back and forth. And I do it for a minute, 4 times, with a minute in between. And it goes up and down. And the reason I'm showing you this is that right next to the speed bag, I have this written down. I don't know if you can see it. So I box as not flaying the air, but I bruise my body and bring it into slavery, lest to others having proclaimed, I myself should be debased. So I am going through the word here. If I do things that are against God, then basically I'm in the same position that Solomon is. If you're a minister and you're doing the things against God, then you're doing the same thing that Solomon is doing. Now, maybe not as far as the amount, how much you're doing it. I suppose it really doesn't matter because it is not what God wants. And I do a lot of things. I do things that I shouldn't be doing. And, but I ask for forgiveness. But Solomon here doesn't say anything about asking forgiveness. Instead, he went and got worse and worse. And I look at different TV evangelists and people that have fallen in the ministries a lot. And they give in to sexual desires, adultery, and are going after other women, causes problems in the ministry, or money or power, all sorts of things that will draw a person away. So what Paul is saying right here is he bruises the body and brings it into slavery. You control your desires, lest to others, having proclaimed, I myself should be debased. Now, it doesn't say that you're going to go to hell if you do things that are wrong and you're in the ministry, but we have to constantly be on guard not to do the things and fight the temptations that are coming against us that Solomon had and other things. But Solomon gave in to these women when his old age, and then he allowed them to do all these things as far as with all these gods of their nations. What was the result of this? The Lord said to Solomon, because these things happened with you, and you guarded not my commandments and my orders, which I gave charge to you, in tearing, I will tear up your kingdom from out of your hand, and I will give it to your bondman. The same thing he did with Saul, and gave it to David, Solomon's father. Now it's going to be torn away from Solomon, David's son. But he makes an exception. In your days, I will not do them on account of David, your father. From out of the hand of your son, I will take it. and that was Jeroboam. Except the entire kingdom in no way shall I take. One chiefdom I will give to your son because of David my bondman, and because of Jerusalem, the city which I chose, and that was Judah. And Judah stayed with David and Solomon. And the Lord raised up Satan, an adversary. Obvious it wasn't the devil. Here it's Satan, an adversary, which is what the devil is, against Solomon. Who was he? He was Adar, called Hadad in the King James, the Edomite, who was down in the southern part of the eastern side of the Dead Sea. He was from out of the seed of the kingdom of Edom. And it happened in David utterly destroying Edom, in the going of Joab, the ruler of the military, to bury the slain, that they smote every male in Edom. For 6 months Joab laid in wait there in all Israel, until of which time he utterly destroyed every man from out of Edom. And Hadad ran away, he and the Edomite men of the servants of his father with him, and they entered into Egypt. And Hadad was a small boy. And they rose up from out of Midian, which was to the west of Egypt, and came into Paran. And they took men with themselves and came to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Hadad entered to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh gave to him a house. Doesn't say why, but he liked him, and he gave him a house and ordered breads for him, food, and gave him land, put him in an important position. And Hadad found favor before Pharaoh exceedingly. And Pharaoh, gave to him a wife, the sister of his wife, the sister of the older sister of Taphanes. So apparently this Taphanes was was a wife of Pharaoh. Place was named after the Taphanes. In the Greek, it's Thekaphanes. And so this Hadad was allied to the Pharaoh. And the sister of Taphanes bore to Hadad, Ganithoth, Genubath, her son. And Taphanes, the wife of Pharaoh, nourished him in the midst of the house of Pharaoh. And Ganithoth was in the house of Pharaoh in the midst of the sons of Pharaoh. And Hadad heard in Egypt that David had gone to sleep with his fathers, and that Joab, the ruler of the military, had died. And Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Send me, and I will return into my land, Edom." And Pharaoh said to Hadad, "Well, what do you lack with me, that you seek to go forth into your land?" And Hadad said to him, "Not one thing, but by sending you shall send me." And God raised up another adversary against him. So apparently he went back and became an adversary to Solomon. The next adversary to Solomon was Rezon, the son of Eliadah, who fled from Adarezer, the king of Zobah, his master. And he was a person that was an adversary to Solomon. And men were gathered together against him. I think that would be Solomon. And he was ruler of the confederation. And he first took Damascus and settled in it and reigned in Damascus. So this Zobah was up towards into Syria. He ends up taking the city of Damascus. And there was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon. This is the evil which Hadad did, and oppressed against Israel, and reigned in the land of Edom. And Jeroboam, son of Nebat. I think I said earlier Jeroboam, son of Solomon, was Rehoboam, son of Solomon, Jeroboam, son of Nebat. I keep getting these two mixed up. I've never been able to figure out how to remember one over the other. Jeroboam, and there's a Jeroboam too later on. Another king of Israel was called Jeroboam. So Jeroboam, the son of Nevat, an Ephrathite, from out of Sarithah, he was the son of a widow woman and was a bondman of Solomon, one of his servants. And this was the thing he did as he lifted up the hand against King Solomon. And King Solomon, now so this is now the story. King Solomon built the Akron. We can add that to your English derivatives book. It's a high place. Acrobat, I believe, comes from that. And he completed the barrier of the city of David, his father, built the wall. And the man Jeroboam was strong in power. Now, I'm not exactly sure if it's physical or just a powerful man with the people around him. Could be both. And Solomon saw the young man that he is a man of works. Ergonomics comes from that. And Solomon, he placed him over the tribute of the house of Joseph, the other tribes up north, so that he would gather in the money for the kingdom. And it came to pass in that time that Jeroboam came forth from out of Jerusalem. And Ahijah, the Shilonite, the prophet, found him in the way. And Ahijah separated him from out of the way, pulled him aside, and Ahijah was wearing a new cloak. And both were alone in the plain, out by themselves. And Ahijah took hold of his new cloak, the new one upon him, and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, well, take to yourself 10 pieces. Theka, we have a decade of 10 years. For thus says Kyrios, O Theos Israel, behold, I tear the kingdom from out of the hand of Solomon, and I give to you 10 chiefdoms. And 2 chiefdoms will be his, on account of my bondman David, and on account of Jerusalem, the city which I chose in it from out of all the tribes of Israel, because he abandoned me. Now you can abandon God. It says Solomon abandoned God. Solomon wrote much of the Psalms. He wrote the Proverbs, book of Ecclesiastes, given wisdom, understanding, and he abandoned God. A person can abandon God. God allows free will to accept him or to reject him. He doesn't put you into some type of a robotic stage after you accept him and say, now that you have accepted me and you said the sinner's prayer, then there's no way that you can ever go to Hades. You're protected forever. And this is taught a lot, but it's not true. It's not biblical. And he offered, and you offered unto Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, and to Chemosh, the idol of Moab, and to Milcom, the loathsome thing of the sons of Ammon. And he went not in my ways to do the upright thing before me, and my orders, and my ordinances. So the orders and the ordinances is all the laws, and ordinance in the law book of doing things a certain way. Order would be something he's telling you to do at that time, as his father David did. And in no way will I take the kingdom entirely from out of his hand. For by resisting, I shall resist him all the days of his life. But I'm not going to take it out of his hand because of David, my bondman, whom I chose him, who guarded the commandments and my ordinances. And I shall take the kingdom from out of the hand of his son, and I will give it to you, the 10 chiefdoms. But to his son I will give the 2 chiefdoms so that there might be a designation to my bondman David all the days before me in Jerusalem, the city which I chose for myself to put my name there. Well, it was only there for a while until they were taken into Babylon, and then later the Romans took them for 2,000 years till now. And you shall take, and you shall reign in wherever your soul desires, and you will be vassalefs over Israel. And it will be, if you should guard all as much as I give charge to you, and should go in my ways, and do the upright thing before me, to keep my orders and my commandments, as did David my bondman, then I will be with you, and I shall build for you a sure house, as I built to David. And I believe that goes for us today, Christians. If we do guard the things that God has given charge, that Jesus has given charge of us to do the things that he has written down in the New Testament, and should go in my ways, the ways of Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Follow him, and do the upright thing before God, the thing that's correct. Sometimes it's not easy. You have to give up things, money or power or relationships, all sorts of things. It's not easy, but to do the upright thing. And to keep my orders, if God says to do something, and either through his word or through a higher up, somebody has an authority, then we're to do them. And his commandments, which the 10 commandments, and then the commandment that he gives to love one another, as did David my bondman. And I shall build to you a sure house. And so we will have a sure house by God. And I will give to you Israel, and I will mistreat the seed of David on account of these things, except not for all the days. There was war between Israel and Judah, and sometimes Israel won, came down and sacked Jerusalem once. And Solomon sought to put Jeroboam to death. So maybe he heard about this, wants to put him to death. And Jeroboam, rose up, ran away into Egypt. They all go to Egypt, to Shishak, king of Egypt. And Jeroboam, was in Egypt until Solomon died, as these other men. And the rest of the words of Solomon, in all, as many things as he did, and all his intellect, behold, have these not been written in the scroll of the sayings of Solomon? Yes. And the days which Solomon reigned in Jerusalem was 40 years over all Israel. And Solomon slept with his fathers, and they entombed him in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned instead of him. So chapter 12, the next chapter, we're going to be going to the next king, his son Rehoboam, find out what happens to King Rehoboam. So to find out, again, you'll have to continue and follow along with these video seminars, which I hope you do. And until the next time, God bless.